I thought it was an echo, but it was a cry. A wet, cracking sound carried through the trees like something calling out and not expecting an answer. His name was Baxter. 7, maybe 8 months old, German shepherd, mostly black, but with rust-colored streaks curling above his eyes like worried brows. He was tied to the base of a fire tower with a short red leash knotted around a metal post, half sunk in mud. It was raining, hard. The kind of rain that soaked you through before you took 2 steps. And yet, he didn't try to hide. He just sat there, soaked, shaking, staring into the dark. I'm Sam. I've been a firefighter in Portland for 24 years. That night, we'd just gotten back from a warehouse fire out in St. John's. One of those calls that hits you harder after you've gone home. No casualties, thank God. But still, memories clinging to your coat like smoke. I couldn't sleep, so I took the long way home through the forest road behind Mount Tabor. Just needed air. That's when I heard it. I stopped the truck in the middle of the road. Headlights caught on rusted metal. The old tower. It hadn't been used in years. My father used to bring me here. Back when he was still alive. Back when he was chief. We'd sit at the base, eat sandwiches, talk about things that mattered and things that didn't. I hadn't been back since his funeral. And now here was this dog. Alone. Drenched. Tied up like trash someone couldn't quite bring themselves to throw away. I got out slowly, my boots sinking into the soft ground. He didn't bark, didn't growl, just lowered his head and let out a sound so quiet it felt like an apology. I crouched. Hey, I whispered, you okay? He blinked. That was all. No tail wag, no panic, just resignation. That's when I saw the note. Folded twice, stuck in a plastic bag under the knot of the leash. I peeled it open with shaking hands, ink smudged. Just one sentence, written in uneven, careful print. Please help Baxter. Dad said firefighters save everyone. My throat closed. I looked around. No lights, no movement, just wind in the trees and that note burning in my fingers. I untied the leash. He didn't resist. Didn't move. I had to lift him. He was lighter than he looked. Soaked to the skin, trembling, heart fluttering under his ribs like something that had nearly given up. I set him in the back seat and wrapped him in the dry sweatshirt I kept behind the passenger seat. For a second, he pressed his head against the glass like he didn't believe this was real. Then he turned and looked at me. Not pleading, just watching. Back at my apartment, I carried him up the stairs. He didn't flinch when the elevator creaked, didn't make a sound, just stayed curled in my arms, quiet, like he was afraid of waking someone who might take this all away. I laid him on an old blanket beside the couch, turned the heat up, and sat with him until my uniform dried on my back. He didn't sleep. Not really. Every time I moved, he lifted his head, ears twitching. When I closed my eyes, I saw my father sitting on the steps of that tower, arms crossed, saying, "You don't leave people behind. Ever." I whispered into the dark like a promise. "You're not alone, Baxter. Not anymore." I didn't take him to the shelter the next day. Couldn't. Instead, I called in late and drove him to the clinic down on 42nd. No chip, no collar, no missing dog reports. The vet said he was dehydrated, underfed, but otherwise okay. Sweet disposition, she said. Somebody raised him right once. I stopped at the Firehouse that afternoon to drop off my gear. Baxter sat in the passenger seat like he'd been riding there forever, his head out the window, the wind lifting the edge of the bandage on his paw. One of the guys saw him and smiled. New recruit? I didn't answer. Just watched as Baxter scanned the yard like he was remembering something he'd never seen. That night, I laid a second blanket beside my bed. But when I woke up, he was curled against my chest, nose tucked under my arm, breathing slow and deep. And I didn't push him away. I told myself it was temporary. Just a few days. Just until I figured out where he came from. But every morning, Baxter looked at me like I was all he had. And maybe I was. He followed me everywhere. Room to room, step for step. Not in that hyper-clingy puppy way. He moved like he'd been trained to be quiet, to take up as little space as possible. He never jumped, never barked, never begged. When I made coffee, he'd sit by the door. When I showered, I'd open the curtain and find him curled on the mat, eyes half closed but always watching. And when I left for a shift, he'd sit by the window until the taillights disappeared. I couldn't shake the image of that note. Dad said firefighters save everyone. I kept hearing it, like a whisper behind everything I did. I even asked the local dispatcher if they'd had any reports of missing pets or kids leaving dogs behind. Nothing. It was like he came out of nowhere. Or maybe he came from exactly where he needed to. 3 days later, I took him to the firehouse. Not officially, just a visit. The guys were skeptical at first, a few jokes, a couple raised eyebrows, but then Baxter did something that shut everybody up. We were in the garage, walking past ladder 2. One of the newer guys dropped a metal tool. It hit the ground with a sharp clang, echoed hard off the concrete. Baxter flinched, but didn't run. Instead, he stepped in front of me, not aggressive, not scared, just ready. Like instinct told him I was his to protect now. After that, he wasn't the dog. He was Baxter. Everybody called him that. One of the guys' dentists started bringing extra treats. Another, Ray's, left an old bedroll in the corner for him. Baxter started making rounds with me when we checked equipment. He'd sit next to the hose rack like he was supervising. He knew where the coffee was, knew which lockers squeaked, knew who needed a little more space and who secretly liked the company. And I started breathing again. I didn't even realize how bad it had gotten. After Dad passed, I thought I was fine. I worked, I ate, I slept, kind of. But there was this low hum of silence under everything, a heaviness. Baxter cracked that open just by being there. One evening, I took him back to the tower. I don't even know why. Maybe I needed to see it again. Maybe I needed to ask the ghost of my father if I was doing the right thing. We parked at the edge of the woods. Baxter hopped down without hesitation, nose up, tail low, calm. He led the way like he knew it. The tower looked smaller in daylight, less haunting. The mud had dried. The post he'd been tied to was still there, frayed rope hanging like a question mark. I stood there a long time. Baxter sat at my feet, looking up at the sky through the broken slats. I said it out loud, though no one was there to hear. "He's not just a dog, Dad." A breeze moved through the trees, light and slow. Baxter stepped forward, sniffed the base of the tower, then looked back at me with those eyes, warm, steady, knowing. I swear in that moment it felt like my father was there too, like something had been passed down. Not a badge, not a helmet, but a reason to keep going. We walked back in silence, not the heavy kind, the good kind, the kind that doesn't need filling. The next week, I brought Baxter to the pediatric unit. We'd gotten a call. A kid wanted to meet a firefighter's dog. It was just supposed to be a morale thing. No pressure. But when Baxter walked into that room, everything changed. The boy had burns on both legs. 7 years old, scared, silent. Wouldn't talk to anyone. But when Baxter walked up slow and low and laid his head on the edge of the bed, the boy reached out. First one finger, then a whole hand, then both arms wrapped around that black and brown neck like he'd been waiting for him all his life. The nurses cried. I did too, quietly in the hallway where no one could see. Later, the boy's mother came up to me. She hugged me without a word and handed me a crumpled drawing. Baxter and the boy under a red fire truck, both smiling. I put it in my locker that night. It's still there. I stopped telling myself it was temporary. There was a rhythm to our days now. Morning coffee, quick walk, shift at the station. Baxter's paws patting softly across the bay floor as I checked equipment, his chin on my boot while I filled out reports, his head lifting every time the radio squawked. He didn't startle, he didn't bark, just watched, alert, present. It had been almost 3 weeks since I found him, and still no word. No one claimed him, no posters, no calls. I drove by the tower twice more, just to be sure. Left notes with local vets posted in the neighborhood forums. Nothing. Like he'd been dropped out of the sky with a note and a mission, and maybe he had. But there was one thing I couldn't shake, the handwriting on that note. It wasn't adult, it was a kid's. Careful. Pressed hard, like they were trying not to cry while they wrote, and the way they phrased it, Dad said firefighters save everyone, not can. Do. That's belief. That's trust you can't fake. One evening, after a long shift and 2 late calls, I came home bone-tired. My uniform smelled like smoke, my boots left black prints on the floor, and my shoulders felt like cinder blocks. I opened the door, and there he was. Baxter. Sitting at attention, tail thumping twice, then still. No whining, no jumping, just that look, like he knew the weight I carried and was ready to help me put it down. I sat on the floor, leaned against the couch, and he walked over and laid his head in my lap. I don't know how long I sat there, long enough for the clock to change hours, long enough for the weight to lift just enough to breathe. That night, I had the first dream about my dad I'd had in over a year. We were both at the station, laughing. He handed me a leash, not a helmet, not a hose, a leash, and he said, "He's yours now." I woke up and Baxter was on the bed. He'd never done that before. He was curled at my feet, eyes closed, ears relaxed, breathing slow, peaceful, like he belonged there. The next morning, I called the shelter, told them I wanted to register an adoption. They asked for a name. "Baxter," I said. The woman on the line paused. "Baxter? We had someone by that name." "Well, a family, but that was a while ago." My heart skipped. "Can you check?" She did. Said a family had visited months ago, a father and daughter. Asked about German shepherds. Took one home, but brought him back 3 weeks later. They said he was too much to handle. Then they changed their mind again. But by the time they came back, the dog was gone. Escaped. Jumped a low fence in the storm. Never found. "Do you know where they live?" I asked. She hesitated. "We're not allowed to give out addresses. But if you want to leave a note, I can pass it on." So I did. A few lines. Nothing dramatic, just that Baxter was safe, that he was with me, and that if they wanted to see him, to let me know. I didn't expect anything. But 3 days later, I got a knock on my door. It was a Tuesday, rainy, again. I opened it, and there she was, a girl maybe 10, holding a small envelope. Her hair was damp, her sneakers were muddy, her hands shook when she held it out. Inside was a drawing, Baxter sitting under a tree, the same tree from the tower clearing. The note said, "Thank you for saving him. We couldn't, but I knew someone would." Behind her stood a woman, her mother, tired eyes, kind smile. She nodded once, like we'd both survived something together. I looked down at Baxter. He'd walked to the door without a sound, sat beside me, looked up at the girl. One soft tail wag, then another. She reached out slowly. He pressed his head into her palm. I asked if she wanted to come in. She looked up at her mom. Got a nod. We sat on the floor, Baxter between us. She told me his name had always been Baxter, that she named him after a book character, that her dad used to say dogs are bridges, that they get us from where we were to where we're supposed to be. I listened, and I realized something. Maybe that's what Baxter was doing all along, building a bridge, one paw at a time. The first time Baxter barked, it was so unexpected I nearly dropped my coffee. We were at the station, morning shift. The guys were getting gear prepped, engines humming low. Baxter had been quiet since the day I found him. Not mute, just respectful, like noise was a luxury he couldn't afford. But that morning, something shifted. One of the new recruits, Nate, was messing around in the back, trying to unjam a stuck locker. Baxter was lying near the bay doors, half asleep, head on his paws. Then Nate let out a sharp yelp and stumbled backward. The lock had snapped and caught his finger. Baxter shot up, ears forward, stance alert. He let out a single, deep bark, not loud, but strong, focused, protective. Nate froze, then laughed. Well, guess I deserved that. Baxter walked over, sat beside him, and looked up like he was checking for injuries. Nate held up his bandaged finger. "You got medical training too?" The whole bay cracked up. And just like that, Baxter wasn't just my shadow anymore. He was ours. The chief noticed too. "You know, Sam, we've had station dogs before. Back in the day, before insurance companies got nervous." He winked. "Might be time for a revival." Baxter adjusted fast. He had his spots under the whiteboard during briefings, on the floor beside the fridge, curled under the bench in the rec room. He didn't need commands. He just knew. When someone was having a bad day, he was there. When the weight of a call hung heavy, he'd lean in, warm and steady. Quiet strength, like a living pause button. Reyes started calling him the inspector. Said Baxter had better instincts than any of us. He'd sniff gear before we loaded up, nudge at helmets left too close to the edge, even barked once when someone left an oxygen tank unsecured. At first, it seemed like coincidence, but after the third time, nobody questioned it. Kids loved him, especially during our school outreach days. I'd kneel beside him while we talked about fire safety, and he'd sit there, calm and still, letting little hands pat his ears and stroke his back. One boy, maybe 6, asked if Baxter had ever been in a fire. "No," I said, "but he's helped people heal from one." That night, I caught myself staring at an old photo in my locker, me and my dad in front of Engine 9, our first day working together. He had his arm around me, proud and tired. I wondered what he'd say if he could see us now, me and this dog, bringing something steady back to the world. I took Baxter back to the tower again the next morning. The air was crisp, sky gray with early winter. No rain this time, Just silence. I watched him sniff around the base, then trot to the edge of the clearing and stop. He stood still, ears perked, nose in the air. I walked over. Down in the brush, half buried beneath old pine needles and wet leaves, was a second piece of paper. Tattered, damp, folded. My heart stuttered as I pulled it free. It was another note. Please don't be mad, I didn't know where else to leave him. He likes trees, and quiet. No name, no date, just that, written by the same hand. Small, tight, full of apology. I stood there for a long time. Baxter sat beside me, not touching, just near, like he was waiting for me to process it. That night, I told the guys about the second note. No jokes this time, just quiet nods. Understanding. Maybe we all saw a little of ourselves in that kid, someone trying to do right with no good options, someone hoping the world would be kind. Later, we had a small grease fire call, nothing major. A kitchen fan sparked, set off the alarms. We handled it quick, no injuries. But there was a dog in the house, an older retriever, panicked and hiding behind the washer. The owner, a woman in her 60s, couldn't get to him. I crouched down, coaxing gently. Nothing worked. Then I stepped aside. Baxter walked in, no hesitation, just calm, quiet presence. He approached slow, nose low, tail still, stopped 3 feet away and lay down, belly to the floor. Waited. A minute passed, then another, and then the retriever crawled out, cautiously, shaking. He sniffed Baxter once, then pressed his side to him like they'd known each other years. The woman sobbed. How did he? I didn't know what to say, because Baxter wasn't trained, he wasn't certified. But somehow, he just knew. Back at the station, as we hosed down the gear, Chief came up beside me. You ever think, he said, that maybe some dogs aren't here to be taught? Maybe they're here to teach us. I looked at Baxter, lying by the engine, head resting on his paws, eyes tracking every move we made. Yeah, I said, every day. The fire was small, but the smoke was heavy. A garage blaze in a quiet neighborhood, cluttered space, oily rags, one spark too many. We were first on scene, no people inside, just property. Or so we thought. I was doing a perimeter check when Baxter stiffened beside me. He'd been trained by no one, but something in him knew when things weren't right. He stopped near the back gate, nose high, muscles locked. Stay, I said, just in case. But he didn't listen. He bolted. I cursed and ran after him, cutting around the side yard. Smoke curled from the eaves, and behind the shed was a rusted chain-link pen barely visible through the haze. Inside, 2 crates. One empty, one closed. Baxter was already there, pawing at the latch. I dropped to my knees and yanked the crate open. Inside was a puppy. Tiny, trembling, maybe 3 months old, gasping from the heat. I wrapped him in my jacket and sprinted out of the yard, Baxter at my heels. We got the pup out just in time. He coughed, whimpered, but made it. Later, the neighbor told us the dog belonged to her niece. She'd left him there for the weekend, thinking he'd be fine. No one knew the garage was a matchbox waiting to light. Back at the station, Baxter sat beside the puppy like a silent sentry. He wouldn't move, wouldn't eat. Just watched him. Hours passed. The puppy slept. Baxter didn't. When the niece came to pick him up, she knelt and hugged Baxter first. I saw the video, she said. One of the neighbors had recorded the rescue and posted it online. It had already been shared a few thousand times. I started to speak, to say it wasn't really Baxter, that I was the one who opened the crate, but I stopped. Because she was right. Without him, we wouldn't have known. That night, the station was quiet. The guys watched the clip on the rec room TV, replaying the moment Baxter ran. Reyes shook his head. We're going to need to get him his own helmet at this point. They laughed, but it wasn't a joke. Chief pulled me aside later. I got a call, he said, from the mayor's office. My stomach turned. They want to give him an award. I blinked. Baxter? Yeah, Chief said, for service, bravery, public morale, you know, all the things our city could use more of right now. I looked over at him. He was lying near the open bay doors, the breeze lifting his fur, the moonlight catching that amber in his eyes. He looked back at me like none of it mattered, like all he cared about was being where he was supposed to be. I don't think he needs a medal, I said. I think he needs a job. The next day, I brought it up with the department board, unofficially, of course. Liability, red tape, all of that. But I made a case, showed the video, told the stories, gave them the numbers. Our community engagement was up. Our school visits doubled in turnout. Kids wrote letters asking when the fire dog was coming back. They listened, and then they asked me the one question I wasn't ready for. Is he yours, officially? I froze. I hadn't thought about it. Not really. He was with me. He lived with me. He slept beside my bed. But no, I'd never signed the papers, never said it out loud. So I did. Yes, I said, he's mine. That night, I printed the adoption form, wrote Baxter's name at the top in block letters, signed mine at the bottom. It felt more final than I expected, not in a bad way, like locking in a piece of my life that had been drifting loose for too long. The next morning, we were called out early. Warehouse fire again, this one bigger, flames visible from the street. We rolled up fast, hoses out, orders flying. I left Baxter in the truck like always, but as I geared up, I turned and saw him watching me through the windshield, eyes locked, still and calm. I raised a hand. Be back soon. But something twisted in my gut, because for the first time I wasn't afraid for me. I was afraid of not coming back to him. The smoke swallowed us whole. Thick, black, chemical-rich. This wasn't just a fire, it was a fight. We breached the side entrance, low and fast, visibility near zero. Pallets of old furniture, broken electronics, and paint cans stacked like a maze. I could hear the roar of flame deeper in, feel the heat building behind every wall. We found the source near the back loading dock. An overloaded fuse box had sparked an ignition chain. Took 3 lines to knock it down, 2 teams cycling out for air. I stayed in, habit, pride, stupidity. The ceiling groaned above us. Years of dry wood and neglect were giving in. Then came the sound I'll never forget. The kind of sound that shuts out everything else. A crack, then a thunderous collapse. I turned, yelled. Reyes was behind me. I pushed him toward the door, and then something hit me. Hard. Not the ceiling. A beam, just enough to knock me sideways, tear my mask loose. My air was gone. My lungs screamed. I tried to crawl, but the world spun. Heat. Panic. The sound of radio static in my ears and the thump of my own heart crashing like a drum. Then a shadow. Through the smoke. Low. Moving fast. I thought I was hallucinating. But then I saw his eyes, amber, glowing like coals. Baxter. He shouldn't have been there. I'd left him in the truck. The windows were up, the doors locked. But there he was. He reached me, nudged my face, snorted at my shoulder, pawed at my vest. I tried to speak, but couldn't. He turned, grabbed the radio mic clipped to my chest strap with his teeth, yanked it down hard enough to trigger the line. Static. Then my name. Then chaos. I blacked out before they pulled me out. Reyes says he saw Baxter dragging my arm, inch by inch, until he collapsed from the heat, just outside the smoke line. The med team got to us in time. Oxygen, fluids, a night at the ER, minor burns, smoke inhalation, nothing permanent. They kept me for observation. I argued. They insisted. I finally shut up when I saw Baxter stretched out on the tile floor beside my gurney, an IV in his paw, oxygen mask over his snout. Silent. Stubborn. Alive. The nurse said he wouldn't rest unless I was in the room. He'd broken the rear window of the truck, bit through the latch, followed our scent into a firestorm. I didn't cry in that hospital bed. I'm not that kind of man. But when I reached down and felt his nose press into my palm like an apology, I had to look away, because there was a lump in my throat the size of a fist, and nothing I could do about it. Chief came by the next day, said the board was already talking about policy changes, that the mayor's office wanted to hold a press conference, that media outlets were calling nonstop. I told him I didn't care about any of that. I just want him okay, I said. Chief nodded. He will be. Baxter was released 2 days before I was. I made Rye's promise to keep him off duty, no visitors, just rest. But when I got home, he was waiting by the door, bandaged paw, patch shaved from his flank, tail thumping once, then twice. I sat down hard on the floor. He climbed into my lap like a puppy, all 40-something pounds of him trembling against my chest. He shouldn't have been there, I whispered. You weren't supposed to follow. But that's the thing about Baxter. He doesn't know how not to. The next day, I found something on the porch. No return address, just a box. Inside, a collar, heavy-duty leather, brass tag, clean engraving. Baxter, Engine 9 rescuer, partner, family. And underneath, another note, same handwriting. I knew he'd save someone. I just didn't know it'd be you. I sat there for a long time. Just me, the tag, the note, and Baxter's head in my lap. Because sometimes rescue doesn't go one way. Sometimes it finds you again when you least deserve it. When you're too tired to ask. When you think you've given all you can. And then a dog like Baxter shows up and reminds you what love looks like with teeth and fire in its lungs. We got a standing ovation at the station. Not for me. For him. The day we came back, Ray's had hung a banner in the garage. White bedsheet, spray-painted letters. Welcome home, Baxter. Someone taped up the newspaper article, Firehouse Dog Saves Veteran Firefighter. His photo was in it. Baxter mid-stride, smoke behind him, eyes locked on the camera like he was chasing purpose itself. The mayor did hold that press conference. I stood beside Baxter in front of City Hall, cameras flashing, microphones shoved in my face. I didn't say much. I didn't need to. Baxter sat perfectly still, bandaged paw wrapped in vet tape with tiny flames printed on it. When the mayor pinned a medal to his collar, he didn't move. Just glanced up at me once, like asking if we could go home yet. They gave me a week off, said I needed rest, said I'd earned it. I didn't know what to do with it. The first morning I woke up at 5 out of habit. Baxter was already sitting by the front door, leash in his mouth, tail brushing the floor. We walked the empty streets before sunrise, just like I used to with my dad when I was 10. He never liked talking before coffee, so we'd just walk. Silence was sacred back then. It still is. Later that day, we visited the pediatric unit again. I hadn't planned to, but one of the nurses called, said there was a new patient who hadn't spoken since arriving. Trauma. 7 years old. They'd tried music, toys, even therapy dogs, but nothing clicked. We stepped through the door quietly. The girl sat curled in the window seat, facing away. Baxter didn't hesitate. He walked up, slow, then laid down right beside her, not touching, just near. She didn't turn, didn't speak. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Finally, her hand reached out, touched his back, stopped, then slid into his fur. I heard it, a whisper. Hi. That's all. Just one word, but it cracked the silence wide open. The nurse cried. I felt my chest tighten. Baxter stayed perfectly still. That moment spread through the hospital like fire through dry brush. Word got out. Letters started arriving. Schools asked if Baxter could visit. Kids mailed in drawings, cards, handmade collars. One class in Beaverton sent a video, 23 second graders chanting, "Thank you, Baxter," in unison, holding pictures of fire trucks and floppy-eared dogs. At the station, he became more than mascot. He became morale. Guys who used to joke about me being the dog guy now brought treats, threw tennis balls during drills, made room for him in the truck cab. Chief ordered a custom turnout coat with Baxter's name stitched in gold thread. Small. Just enough for him to wear during visits. One afternoon, while sorting gear, I found Rise staring at a framed picture someone had hung in the rec room. It was me and Baxter in front of Engine 9, sunrise behind us. The city's still asleep. Reyes didn't turn when he spoke. You think he knows? Knows what? That he changed this place. I looked at the picture. Baxter's ears were perked. My hand rested on his collar. We both looked like we belonged. I think he knows exactly what he's doing, I said. That weekend, we went back to the fire tower. One last time. Not because we had to, because I needed to. The ground was dry, the air crisp. No storm this time. Just quiet. The same kind of quiet my dad used to call earned silence. I sat on the bottom step, Baxter beside me. We watched the trees sway in the wind. I pulled something from my pocket. The first note. Crumpled. Faded. I'd kept it in my wallet since the day I found him. Please help Baxter. Dad said firefighters save everyone. I read it out loud, then folded it again, tighter this time. I think we both did okay, I said. Baxter licked my hand once, then laid his head on my boot. We didn't need more words. Fall turned to winter, like someone dimmed the world a little at a time. The trees let go of their leaves, the air got sharper, and the nights stretched out longer than they should have. I started wearing my father's old station coat again. Too heavy, too stiff, but warm where it counted. Baxter adjusted fast. He didn't mind the cold. If anything, he liked it. He'd trot ahead through frost-covered sidewalks, tongue out, tail wagging slow like he was tasting every bit of air. The school district called about a holiday event. They were putting together a service appreciation day, firefighters, EMTs, officers, and they asked if Baxter could be part of it. Not me. Him. They wanted Baxter to sit in a reading circle with the kids. No speeches, no handlers, just presence. So we went. The gymnasium smelled like crayons and floor polish. Dozens of little chairs in a ring, teachers herding sugar-hyped kindergartners like sheepdogs in sneakers. Baxter waited beside me until the first bell rang. Then he walked into the center and sat. Still. Calm. Unshakable. The kids poured in. At first they whispered. Then came the questions. Can he shake? Does he know tricks? Can I hug him? I nodded. Baxter handled them like a pro. Every hand, every squeal, every hug, he took it all in without flinching. A little boy with a cast on his leg leaned into him so hard I thought they'd both fall. Baxter didn't move, just leaned back. Then a teacher read Firefighter Ted, and when she said the word hero, 3 kids pointed to Baxter. It got me. Not the praise, not the attention, the truth of it. Because he wasn't a symbol. He wasn't some department mascot or PR tool. He was a dog who shouldn't have survived, who was left behind twice, once by a family, once in a fire, and still came back, still trusted, still gave everything. That night, I sat on the couch and scrolled through the photos they'd sent. One stood out. A girl, maybe 5, asleep on a beanbag. Baxter curled around her like a shield, both breathing in the same rhythm. I set it as my lock screen. A few days later, we got a call out to a small house fire. Dryer unit shorted, flared up, burned through the wall, contained fast. No injuries. But as I walked through the living room, I saw a child's crayon drawing on the fridge. It was Baxter, or close enough. Big ears, badge on his collar, fire truck in the background. I blinked. "What's this?" I asked the mom. She smiled. "That's the dog from the news. My son talks about him every day." I turned. The boy stood in the hallway holding a plastic helmet and a stuffed shepherd. When he saw Baxter behind me, he dropped both and ran. Hugged him without hesitation. "Hi, fire dog," he whispered. Later, back at the station, Chief pulled me into his office. "You've seen the fundraiser, right?" I hadn't. Turns out someone started a campaign, Baxter's Fund, to raise money for therapy dog training for shelter rescues. Within 3 days, it passed 50,000. By the end of the week, it hit 6 figures. People weren't just watching, they were acting. We got letters from halfway across the country, families saying they adopted because of Baxter, kids asking if they could visit him. A woman in Florida wrote that her son spoke his first full sentence after watching Baxter's school visit online. This little guy's journey from abandonment to rehabilitation shows how important nonprofit rescue groups really are. That line stuck with me, because it was true. I didn't rescue him alone. It was the kid who left the note, the family who tried, the shelter that took him, the vet, the team, the city, all of us. And Baxter? He gave it all back. He became more than rescued. He became rescue itself. The guys made him an official badge, same design as ours, stamped metal, number 9, just like the truck. He wore it proudly, chest out, head high. But at night, at home, he'd still curl up beside my bed with a sigh like he'd been running all day. I'd reach down, scratch behind his ear, and whisper, "Good work, partner." And he'd thump his tail twice, every time. It was just supposed to be a drill. Routine. Controlled burn at the old training lot near 122nd, half-collapsed structure, marked and cleared, no risk to life. We'd done it a dozen times before. Practice for the new recruits. Time the response, cycle the crews, test the air supply. Easy. But things never stay easy in this line of work. Wind shifted, fast, faster than the forecast warned. Embers lifted like sparks from a grinder and carried across the lot into the dry underbrush. One flame became 10. 10 became 50. Before we knew it, the backside of the lot was choked in gray. Not wild, but angry. Hungry. Reyes and I were on suppression, sweeping the tree line. I'd left Baxter back at the edge, tethered by the command tent, under strict order from Chief to stay put. He didn't like it. I could see it in his stance, alert, ears up, every muscle tight like a coiled spring. He didn't bark. He never did when it counted. But I felt his eyes on me the whole time. Then I heard the scream. It wasn't one of ours. A kid, high, sharp, cut right through the roar of the fire. Then again, closer this time. We didn't know anyone was nearby, no bystanders allowed, but someone had slipped in, maybe from the neighboring trail. I dropped the hose, radioed in, and ran toward the sound. And that's when Baxter broke. He yanked the tether, snapped it clean, bolted like a bullet down the hill before anyone could stop him. I chased, heart pounding harder than the heat behind me. Through the smoke, I saw her, maybe 11, standing at the edge of a wash, too close to the flame line, frozen by panic, eyes wide, feet locked, no clue which way was safe. Baxter reached her first. He didn't lunge, didn't bark, just stood in front of her and pressed his side into her knees. She grabbed onto his collar like it was a life raft. He turned, pulled, slow and steady, like he'd done it 1,000 times. I caught up, scooped her into my arms, and we ran, Baxter leading, clearing the way. When we reached the safe zone, I heard cheers, radios crackling, someone shouting my name. I handed her off to medics, dropped to one knee, and finally looked Baxter in the eye. His fur was singed at the tips, his nose black with soot, but his eyes, clear, focused, like always. The girl's parents arrived 10 minutes later, breathless. Turns out she'd wandered off from a family walk, ducked under the caution tape, and got trapped between the trees and the fencing. They kept saying thank you over and over to me, to the crew, but especially to Baxter. The next day, the video went viral. A bystander from a nearby rooftop had filmed it. Baxter running through smoke, leading the girl by her shirt collar. The image froze at the moment they crossed into the clear, him looking back over his shoulder, her clinging to him like he was made of hope. Media outlets called it the Portland Miracle. I hated that phrase, because there was no miracle. There was training. There was instinct. There was a dog who refused to stay behind, and there was a crew that finally stopped seeing him as the rescue dog and started seeing him as one of us. We held a vote that night. Chief brought out a clipboard, passed it around the kitchen table, one line at the top, promote Baxter to honorary member, Engine 9. Unanimous. We held a ceremony the next morning. Small. Just us. I clipped the badge to his vest myself. He didn't fidget, didn't blink, just stood still, chest forward, tail low, like he understood. Reyes gave a speech, said Baxter reminded us who we were on the hard days, said he brought something no training manual could. Courage, he said, the quiet kind. I looked down at him, my hand on his collar. You earned this, I whispered. His tail thumped once, and in that moment I knew something had shifted, not just in him, in all of us. The letter came in a plain white envelope, no return address. Just my name, Sam, in all caps, written in that same uneven print I'd never forget. I found it in my locker, tucked between my gloves and the extra bandage pack I always kept stashed there. For a second, I didn't breathe, just stared at it. My fingers shook as I tore it open. Inside was a single page, lined paper, pencil, faint smudges like someone had erased a few lines and tried again. Hi, I don't know if you remember me. I'm the one who left the note at the tower. I'm older now. My dad's better. We have a new place. Things are okay. Not great, but better. I saw the video of Baxter. You made him brave. I just wanted to say thank you for not giving up on him. I think about him all the time. I hope he still likes trees. No name. Just a heart drawn at the bottom. Inside it, the word thanks. I sat there for a long time. The bay doors were open. Wind rolled through, warm and dusty, the last breath of winter. Baxter lay stretched on the concrete nearby, chewing softly on the corner of his old rope toy. When I called his name, he looked up, ears perked. I didn't say anything, just nodded. Later that night, I took him for a drive. No destination, just streets we hadn't seen in a while. I let the windows down. He leaned into the air, nose twitching, eyes half closed like he was cataloging every scent the world had to offer. We stopped at the tower. Of course we did. The path was overgrown now, branches clawing at the edges, but the tower still stood, tilted slightly more than last year, paint peeling, rust growing in the bolts, but it stood. Baxter trotted ahead, nose low, tail steady. He didn't hesitate, just like before. He found the base, circled once, then sat. Same spot, like it was his. I sat on the first step, pulled the letter from my jacket, read it again. He watched me. You do still like trees, I said. He gave one soft huff in response, almost a laugh. We stayed until the light dipped behind the hills, long enough for the cold to find my bones. I stood to leave, and Baxter didn't follow. He just looked up at the tower, then at me. I knew what he was asking, so I climbed. The steps creaked, some bent under my weight, but I made it. For the first time in years, I stood at the top, wind tugging at my coat, city lights flickering in the distance, like stars trying to rise. Baxter sat below, a dark silhouette against the fading sky, and for a moment everything felt still. No calls, no sirens, no wait, just this dog, this tower, this life we hadn't planned but built anyway. The next week, the department finalized the new outreach program. Baxter's Shift, a community initiative pairing Firehouse dogs with recovery centers, schools, and veterans groups. Not just PR, real connection, real impact. They asked me to help lead it. I said yes before they finished the sentence. Because Baxter wasn't just part of my story anymore. He was part of Portland's. Of every child who touched his fur, every family who saw their pain reflected in his eyes, Every firefighter who found new purpose watching him do what we sometimes forget how to do, stay soft in a world that keeps hardening. One afternoon, I came home to find a box on the porch. Another collar, new, same brass tag, but this time it read, Baxter. Companion, rescuer, teacher. Inside was a note. Thought he might need a dress collar for the kids' tour. You never know when the right look can change someone's heart. A friend. I never found out who sent it, but I fastened it around his neck anyway. He sat up straighter when I did. I stepped back and smiled. You ready for the next shift? His tail swept once across the floor. That was all the answer I needed. We don't measure time by clocks in this job. Not really. It's not the hours, not the shifts. It's the calls, the ones that stay. And Baxter was one of those moments that stayed. It had been nearly a year since the tower, since the leash, since the note that changed both our lives. In that time, Baxter had visited 23 schools, 7 hospitals, and 3 fire stations. He'd been on local news 12 times, appeared in a national campaign for rescue awareness, and had over 1 million views on a short clip of him letting a toddler fall asleep on his back during story time. But none of that was what defined him. It was what he did when no one was watching. He'd sit beside a rookie who just failed his first drill, head tilted like he was listening. He'd wander the perimeter after a call, sniffing gear, checking corners, making sure we didn't miss anything. He'd lie across my feet on nights I couldn't sleep and press his head into my ribs when memories hit harder than they should. He didn't ask, didn't expect. He just gave. One evening, I caught Reyes standing outside the bay doors, staring at the sunset. Baxter sat next to him, both of them still like statues. He ever talk to you? Reyes asked. Not with words. Reyes nodded. Feels like he does. I looked over. Baxter glanced at me, eyes steady, ears relaxed. Yeah, I said. Me too. Later that week, we had a call. Structure fire in a duplex, 2 units. Small blaze, mostly smoke, contained fast. But when I stepped into the second unit, I found a cage. Tipped over, empty. Scorch marks around the base. Anyone missing a pet? I called. An older man rushed forward, coughing. My dog, small shepherd, Luna. She was in the kitchen. We searched. Carefully. The air was thick, but no flames left. I turned toward Baxter, who stood at the threshold, scanning. He moved suddenly, low and fast, toward a pile of collapsed drywall. I followed. She was there, huddled, shaking, trapped under a piece of shelving. Baxter lay beside her, nose touching her muzzle. No noise, just stillness. She stopped trembling. We lifted the shelf, slid her out gently. Her eyes never left him. Later, while the man cried into her fur, he looked up at me. She was my wife's. Past last year, I didn't think I'd see her again. Thank you. I looked at Baxter. It wasn't me, I said. Back at the station, the guys cleaned gear. The sky outside turned purple with sunset. I sat on the steps of the engine bay, Baxter beside me, shoulder to shoulder. You know, I said, my dad used to tell me fire changes things, not just what it touches, but who watches it. Baxter looked up, just slightly, then back at the sky. He was right, I added. It changed me. And you lit something back up in here. I tapped my chest. He leaned his weight into my side. I used to think rescue was about pulling people out of burning buildings, about doing the job, but now I know it's also about staying, about showing up, about making someone feel safe enough to rest. That's what Baxter gave me. Not just safety, belonging. That weekend, we attended a memorial for a retired firefighter. Big turnout, bagpipes, folded flags, the works. Baxter sat quietly at the front, never flinched. A young man, maybe 20, came up after. Introduced himself as the man's grandson. Said he'd watched Baxter's story online and it helped him grieve. I didn't know dogs could carry that kind of weight, he said. I smiled. Sometimes they carry more than we ever could. That night, I found an old photo tucked into my locker. Me at 10, standing next to my dad, both of us in junior gear. Behind us, Engine 9. I hadn't seen that picture in years. I turned it over. There was handwriting on the back. My dad's. Save lives, but don't forget to live yours. Baxter's paw hit the floor beside me as he laid down. I held the picture, stared at it, then at him. You think I'm doing that? I asked. He sighed, a long, slow exhale through his nose, and I knew what he meant. Yeah, we are. Some stories begin in silence. Ours began in rain, a soaked leash, a folded note, a dog left behind not because he wasn't loved, but because someone hoped the world would be kind. Baxter was never just a rescue. He was a reminder that strength doesn't always bark, that courage doesn't need permission, that healing sometimes walks in on four legs and asks for nothing except to stay. I thought I was saving him, but truth is, he saved me first. He pulled me out of the grief I didn't know I was still drowning in, brought life back into rooms I had stopped entering, turned quiet into comfort, turned duty into purpose, and he did it the way only a dog can, with loyalty that doesn't waver and a heart that never stops giving. People ask what makes a hero. They expect uniforms, medals, grand acts. But sometimes it's a single moment, a soft gaze in a smoke-filled room, a silent step into danger, a calm presence beside a child who's forgotten how to speak. That was Baxter. Everywhere he went, he carried light. Not because he was trying to, but because it followed him. I see it in the drawings taped to the Firehouse walls, in the letters from kids who say he made them brave, in the look on a mother's face when her son finally smiles again, in the quiet thanks from a father who lost too much and found something steady in a dog's warm eyes. This little guy's journey from abandonment to rehabilitation shows how important nonprofit rescue groups really are. Caring for a rescued puppy is more than love. It's responsibility. It's pet care. It's choosing every single day to believe that second chances matter, that someone else's throwaway can become someone's everything. So if you've watched Baxter's story and felt something stir, something small but certain, please don't let it end here. There are more dogs like him, waiting, hoping, deserving. Share this video, tell someone, start a conversation, because the more we spread these stories, the more lives we reach, not just theirs, but ours too. Join our Brave Paws family. Be their voice. Be their hope.